Powered by Riverside FM.
The Minnesota Vikings schedule dropped yesterday at 7 p.m. Man, the NFL are total marketing geniuses, man. You know, when you look at the NFL draft and what that has grown to be, remember when the NFL draft used to be in like the conference room of a hotel? When you look back at some of the old footage of the NFL, and then just a few weeks ago, they had a great draft at Lambeau Field, all the people there, all the speculation, all of that good stuff. Well, that's because the NFL's marketing group is absolutely fantastic. And now people were waiting on pins and needles for the schedule to come out. We had the opponents, about a month ago, so we knew who the Minnesota Vikings were going to play. We just didn't know in what order and what the bye weeks were going to be and how many national football games we were going to have. And everybody was sitting on pins and needles, shows on ESPN and Minnesota Vikings content creators, including myself, speculating on what we wanted the schedule to look like and what it was going to be. And it's just a schedule. And for all the excitement, that's just credit to the NFL. You know what's next? I've been saying this for a long time. They're going to try to profit and make money off the NFL Combine sooner or later. That's coming. Because if they open the NFL Combine up to the public, people are going to show up. How they are going to do it, I don't know. There's a lot of business that goes on at the Combine, a lot of evaluation of players. So how do you integrate fans into that? I don't have any idea, but let me tell you this. If the NFL can make some money off of it, they are going to figure it out. Now to the schedule. We didn't get everything that we wanted in terms of the Minnesota Vikings schedule. I put out a podcast a few days ago about my wish list and what I wanted the NFL schedule to be like for the Minnesota Vikings. We didn't get everything, but we got a few things that I think was important and that I like. The first glaring thing is that we have the two international games back-to-back, Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns, two beatable teams. So we'll be overseas for two games in a row. And I think, that's a disadvantage to the second team traveling over there because they're going to have to get acclimated to being overseas. The Minnesota Vikings already, having played one game overseas, is going to already be acclimated to the environment over there. So they're going to have to spend two games over there. It's going to be tough coming back to the States, though, for the Minnesota Vikings. At least they have a bye when they first get back, but really shortly after that, they have a Thursday night game. So that is going to be tough for the Purple. But, if they put a plan in place, they are definitely going to be able to handle that. People are making a big deal about it. It sucks, but it was two away games, so we're not sacrificing a home game for the Minnesota Vikings. So it's not that big of a deal. It's something that they are going to have to deal with. But the one thing that I like about the schedule that really sets up for the Minnesota Vikings is that the first 5 games of the season are winnable games. They're winnable games. You're talking about the Chicago Bears, the Atlanta Falcons, Cincinnati Bengals, Pittsburgh Steelers, Cleveland Browns, man. Cleveland Browns. Now, I'm not saying that the Minnesota Vikings are going to have to go 5-0, but they can go 5-0. You look at that first 5 games of the schedule, who you scared of in there? I mean, I know Joe Burrow is coming to town, but how good will the Bengals team be? I think the Minnesota Vikings are a better team. They're just a better team than the Cincinnati Bengals. But if they had to drop a game, it would probably be that one because Joe Burrow could come in and he could put up some numbers, but he's going to be going against B-Flow's defense, so that's going to be a daunting task for him. First game of the season, the Chicago Bears. Have you guys been hearing the stuff about Caleb Williams, UP Nation, that's been coming out the last 24 hours? They're talking about Caleb Williams and his dad. Stuff is starting to leak out that he wanted to get to the Minnesota Vikings, and I don't blame him. I mean, everybody wants to play for the quarterback whisperer, KOC. I don't blame him for wanting to be in this organization, but it sounded like he didn't want any part of the Chicago Bears, and they were going to try to manipulate some things to make sure that he got to the Minnesota Vikings. And he was the number 1 pick. A lot of people forget about that. So in terms of the Minnesota Vikings trading up to get him, they would have had to give up a lot of capital to do that. So how Caleb Williams and those guys were going to try to get that done to get to the Purple, I don't know, but I don't care. We've got JJ McCarthy. I would rather have JJ. I think he fits the system a little bit better. And listen, man, Caleb Williams, he's going to have to address this. This is going to be a distraction for the Chicago Bears. It's going to be a distraction really intensified because the first game of the season is against who? JJ McCarthy and the Minnesota Vikings. So not only are the questions going to be asked in OTAs, not only are the questions going to be asked in training camp, but all the way leading up to that game, there's going to have to be questions that are answered by Caleb Williams. I think it's going to be that detrimental to that locker room. He's going to have to now appease his coaches and the players in that locker room. And that's not going to be easy. Outwardly, they're going to say the right things and do the right things, but there are going to be some hurt feelings. And he's got to win over some of the fans as well, all this stuff starting to leak out. So it's not going to be easy for Caleb Williams. Again, I don't blame him for wanting to get to the purple, but to have this stuff coming out now that, hey, man, I want to go to Minnesota, I don't want any part of the Chicago Bears, that organization and Caleb Williams are going to have to address that sooner or later. But the schedule sets up favorably. After that bye, the Minnesota Vikings have some really, really good teams that they got to play. I mean, you're talking about the Philadelphia Eagles, the Chargers, the Detroit Lions, the Baltimore Ravens. Here it comes after the bye week. But I think the good thing about it is those first 5 games are going to be confidence builders for JJ McCarthy. I didn't want his first 5 games to be against really, really stout defenses and really, really good defensive coordinators. I just didn't want that for JJ McCarthy. I think he's going to have time to really cut his teeth in the NFL, get used to that speed. Those windows close really fast in the NFL. I know he's probably going to have a few preseason snaps under his belt, but I don't expect for him to get a lot of work during the preseason, risking injury, especially with that knee. So those first 5 games are going to be crucial for JJ McCarthy. I think this schedule bodes well for the Minnesota Vikings. The middle of it is a little bit tough. You're going to have an important game, I believe, with the Green Bay Packers at the end of the season. So a lot of intriguing things come out. It's really too early to speculate who's going to win what. But I think it's safe to say that the first 5 games of the season that the Minnesota Vikings are going to come out of that over 500, 3-2, I think probably 4-1, and gravy on top of the mashed potatoes is going to be 5-0. Cherry on top of the sundae, 5-0 for the Minnesota Vikings if they can get through that. But there's going to be time to speculate, go game by game. Once we know a little bit more, it's just too early to speculate. Now, we talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves every now and then on this station. And I think you got to. Whenever you have the sports teams in Minnesota that start to do well, you got to support them. The Minnesota Timberwolves are in the Western Conference Finals again. Anthony Edwards, Julius Randle, and the fellas are putting in work. And I love my guy Ant, man. Ant is the franchise, the face of the franchise, whether he wants it to be or not. But Julius Randle, last series against the Golden State Warriors, the old Golden State Warriors, Draymond Green, Steph Curry, those guys are getting old. And they looked old. Steph Curry obviously got hurt. Jimmy Butler was there trying to be playoff Jimmy. He wasn't playoff Jimmy this time. Draymond Green could defend, but Draymond Green, you can let him shoot 3-pointers all he wants. He's not a consistent scorer. And the Minnesota Timberwolves just dismantled them. And they move on to the Western Conference Finals for the second year in a row. For the first time in franchise history, they're going to have to face the Denver Nuggets. They're going to have to face the OKC. And I don't know who I would want to face. I guess it would have to be the Nuggets. If I had to pick, you put a gun to my head and make me pick, it would have to be the Denver Nuggets. I just don't think the Denver Nuggets are that deep. OKC is really bouncy, really young, and can throw bodies at Ant. So that's what I'm worried about. But whoever we play, I think we're going to be able to handle them. The one thing about Anthony Edwards is I think he's kind of figured some things out, man. And I'm just going to give him the benefit of the doubt because in the last series, there were times where he really didn't look super aggressive in terms of trying to score the basketball. And at the end of the game, he has the best stats ever. But I think Anthony Edwards last year admittedly said he ran out of gas in those late series. This year, he's pacing himself. It's got to be it, man. It's got to be it. He's got to be pacing himself if you watch those games. I mean, there are times where, everything is Julius Randle. And I think in last night's game, he was a facilitator, wasn't really being aggressive, trying to score the ball until late. I think he's saving something for these later series. It's going to be interesting to see what his body language is about. Is he gassed? Is he tired during these series? I think he's reserving himself for these later series, and I think you're going to see a different Ant in terms of his mentality to want to score the basketball. Because he's going to have to ramp it up and be a lot better in terms of scoring. Man, it only gets tougher from here in the NBA. Like, I don't think you can be the floor general, the facilitator. Like, there are going to be games where you just have to go for 40. And you got to have that mentality. And there are times where, he can score, but there are times where I just don't think Ant has that mentality. And he's going to have it for the Western Conference Finals and then especially the finals, depending on who they play. Man, wouldn't it be intriguing if the Minnesota Timberwolves played the New York Knicks in the finals? Big Cat, Julius Randle, Dante DiVincenzo's players on the Knicks, man, that would be one for the ages. A lot of storylines in that. That would be one that I would be hoping to see. Knicks haven't been in the finals in a long time. You got Big Cat returning. Can the Minnesota Timberwolves win without him? Man, that would be box office to watch. But again, man, it's great to be a Minnesota fan right now. Minnesota Timberwolves in the Western Conference Finals, and our purple, they just haven't looked any better. And now we got a young franchise quarterback at the helm. Schedule is out. It's going to be interesting to break down the schedule even more to see what our record is going to be. There's that speculation also. What is our record going to be at the end of next year? But we'll get to that when we get to that. This has been Unconventional Playbook, man. Hit that like and subscribe button. And as always, UP Nation, we will see ya when we see ya. Skol, UP Nation. Skol.